is preparing to live stream.
It says this meeting is being live streamed. Did everybody get that?
Did.
Yes.
Okay.
Yay.
Welcome to live stream, everybody.
Yay.
Right.
Yay. Here we are.
I feel alive.
So let me just say it hasn't really started.
Okay.
It says
Now
recording.
it is. Now it is started.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to July 20th UNNC Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, second of the month. I'm John Arnold. I am a co-chair with
Laura Myers. And I don't know if John said this. I live in Angeles Vista and I'm on the governing board.
And our first order of business is to say once again that we are now out of compliance with the governor's order for 18 months after COVID started. And we're waiting for the state and the city to get their acts together to see how we go forward with virtual meetings or have virtual meetings. But in the meantime, we have to say we are still virtual and this meeting will be held virtually. So that's just business with state law.
And I am trying to pull up the agenda to show on the screen.
So welcome. Again, I'm John Arnold. I'm Region 6 Representative Jefferson Park East. And so we have so we go around the room and introduce ourselves. If we vote on anything, we ask anyone who's in attendance who is a stakeholder, who believes they're a stakeholder, to please declare so in their intention to vote. Otherwise, you can stay silent or just say your name and tell us anything you want about yourself. So I'm John Arnold. I'm a stakeholder in Jefferson Park, homeowner in Jefferson Park, and chair of this meeting and a board member. Laura?
I'm Laura Myers. I am a stakeholder and I live in Angeles Vista. And the only thing I don't have is the agenda to share. Sorry.
I can share.
Okay.
Hi, I am Teresa Masonette. I represent the West Adams Avenues on the board of the United Neighborhoods Neighborhood Council, and I too am a stakeholder.
Steve?
I'm Steve Peckman. I'm a resident of Jefferson Park and I am a stakeholder resident.
Great. Donna?
Hi, I'm Donna Jones, a resident of West Adams Avenues, and I'm a stakeholder.
Great.
And John, we have one more person who has
I see.
arrived.
So call on user number 1. If you want to introduce yourself, you may. If you are planning on voting, we need you to introduce yourself in your stakeholder status. So we don't hear from you, we'll assume you're just listening in, which we welcome as well. Okay, if you want to change your mind, please let us know. Call on user number 1. Okay, that's welcome. And now last part of item number 2 is review the agenda. We have a regular public comment period. Laura and I made this agenda over the weekend, and we have a few, and we were looking at this to be basically how we move forward educating our and informing our constituents. So we have 2 items. One is to review what we do with our Planning 101, which we haven't done for a few years because of COVID. But we also have an opportunity to perhaps, because we believe that we do have a good Planning 101 that's better than the city's Planning 101, and we might take it on a road show to other NCs to at least show people how else it is done in other neighborhood councils. So we're looking for input for item number 4 from the community, but what is a burning need, desire, or information to have. So Laura and I can prepare that. Item number 5 is similar, just to review HPOZ processes. This was a request from a stakeholder, especially regarding to a recent appointment from CD10 to a HPOZ board in our zone. Number 6, we've been asked by the president of the UNNC to outline each committee to outline their goals for the year, which we're going to do tonight. And then we have our usual follow-up of cases, which we have a few, and our adjournment. So we no longer vote on the agenda unless we want to move something around, but these are the agenda items for this evening. Moving on to public, item number 3, public comments. Anyone has a public comment for anything that's not agendized today, please raise your hand and let us know what you're thinking. Seeing none, let's move on to preparation for UNNC Planning 101. So again, Planning 101 is meant to be, I'm managing this portion. Laura's going to manage the HPOZ discussion. So Planning 101 is a educational course for stakeholders for a couple of reasons. As board members, we have a responsibility to be impartial, to voice the view of our constituents or of ourselves. And we also have the power over people's property rights. And that has come in the form of being advisors to the council office on planning and zoning issues before us. And then the council then, or the city, or the CPC then, or the Cultural Heritage Commission then votes based on input they've heard. So we do have some power over people's lives. And so we feel it's best for everyone to know what those powers are, how we can affect change, what are the ways we can affect change, and also be well-versed and informed on all the processes get put in front of us, because some of it's very technical, some of it is goes right over everyone's head. And so we want to hear from everybody about what things are important, because Laura and I can go in our wonky rabbit holes all day long. We can come to these meetings thinking everyone knows what we're talking about. So
John, may I interrupt for one moment, please?
sure.
Can we remove the agenda? I tried, but the only way I could remove it was by sharing something else, and we're not there
I
yet.
look at the little pictures. So we have our past 101, which we can show just to get the juices flowing. I have that on my.
Do you want me to do that while you're talking, or do you want to do
Why
it
don't I do it? That way I can flip through it. So that's what I
Okay.
was thinking. We could flip through our 101.
real
Some
fast?
things are out of date. And I know, and there's some things aren't included now that have come to pass, especially in state law. So I'm going to share my screen.
John, could I ask a question while you're sharing screen?
You bet.
So with all the problems at CD10, who does the UNNC actually go to have a voice on the city council?
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, that just happened yesterday. That's probably a discussion for past cases.
Well, I have a
Laura,
clean,
please.
I do have a clean answer for the moment, and it would be the same person we've been going to for planning and zoning, which is Hakeem.
Okay.
Because he.
But what does Hakeem do with it if we don't have a vote on the council?
Well, he goes to, I mean, in other words, if there's a hearing, he goes and he speaks. I mean, we've been,
So he
right,
speaks on behalf of the
council office.
the council office during
Right.
public meetings and things like that.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
that makes
he
sense.
did do that after Mark left, and when there was nobody, and then when there was Carly, and then when there's not Carly and there was her.
Right, okay.
He's been a through line. So,
Got it.
but he's not a person, he's not a decision maker higher up. I mean, he would still be asking somebody. And the question that I have no answer to would be, who was that somebody now?
So I
And
assume that
we digress.
and I assume that Hakeem can lobby other council members to hear our viewpoint to affect change that way. But I don't like to use this word because it's often used hyperbolically,
Yeah.
but we are disenfranchised. We have
Oh,
no-
yeah. Absolutely. We were before Herb was named, and now we are again.
Yep.
I know these are kind of real political matters, but as a functional issue of this committee, right? As you said, John, there are a lot of responsibilities that go with decision-making on this committee. And I know I've participated in many decisions where we make recommendations to the board, and then the board sends them up to the council person. And council person oftentimes takes an action. And now we have a council person, but we have a council person who's not allowed to take any action. So
We have two council persons who are not allowed to take any action.
right. But if does Hakeem have the authority to act on UNNC recommendations to the council office?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
Teresa,
yeah,
you
but
have-
I don't want to take up all the air on this, but I was just curious because John, I thought that was a really good introduction, and I'm kind of curious how functionally things are going to be carried out in this period.
Oh, I have a comment on that, but Teresa, your hand is up.
Yes, I have a comment too. And I'm just going to bring it back to the Sycamore Grove and Crenshaw Crossing. UNNC did put forth a CIS saying that we supported the housing with the caveat that they preserve the grove. And when that came up through the appeal, it went through Plum, and Marquise Harris Dawson, who chairs that committee, asked Hakeem what the position was. And I will say this, he did not say his name, but he said the CD10 position was no, but it was him. So
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really important.
And I was going to mention that we do have other tools, one of which is CIS's, one of its letters to CPC, cultural heritage, whoever's doing it. So those letters get sent, and whether they can be forcibly presented, we can always speak at those meetings, which we've done. So there are ways to get our voice heard, but then there's no vote to back it up. So it's relying on a layer of lobbying, as it were. Laura.
Well, this discussion, it does occur to me, I mean, our presentation is already is something like 57 slides long, but we don't I know, well, no, we're not, well, it's because it's usually an hour and a half training session, right? We're going to go through fast tonight.
10 slides max.
Wait. But the point is, what we don't have in it is this. How do we influence city, so that would be for us note-taking, John.
Yeah.
It's something to consider, to figure out at the end, not the beginning. How do we get our neighborhood council voice heard? Not politically, but that's something, that's a generic question. How can you communicate your messages?
Let me, I want to, if we could all take some meeting notes, that would be helpful to me.
Sure. Well, I'm going to do that.
PowerPoint.
I'm going to chat. I'm going to do it in the chat.
More than 10 slides.
No.
So,
This is
so
yeah,
I think
go
that's
ahead.
I think that's a good first point to describe what are the tools we have to have our voices heard. And we just mentioned, I think most or all of them, letters, and especially now that we're in a void. So we're in a little transition zone. So this is Planning 101, define what urban planning is, define what zoning is, the alphabet soup that we're all, I can't remember exactly how we introduced these topics, but the alphabet soup that we all know about, the AB 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, 4, 5, 6, and HPOZ and TOC and everything else, and DBs, and what else, we know all about them. So this is basically what we started, a wonky guide. I call it wonky with some self-deprecation. But so we all know that when we get cases before us, they usually have a string of letters in front of them. These are some of the most common ones that we see. We can probably expand on some of these, especially density bonus is the one that has grown quite a bit since we did this Planning 101. That's where Sacramento puts most of their laws into, is in expanding the density bonus law. So that's what that is. This is reviewing how ZEMIS works. Teresa?
And the co-housing that we were talking about, I don't know if there's a state law or a code for that, but I'd like to make sure we have that as part of the discussion too.
Yeah, that probably is, there's, as Laura has discovered, there's a density is a way to measure how many units on a lot and how you measure those units. And there's something afoot at the state to start measuring density and defining density through the number of beds that are in a unit. And I'm not sure how that's panning out, but there's an intent. To me, the intent in Sacramento is to do away with density, as in you can do a form-based, the building envelope can be only X big, and the number of units or the number of beds, whatever you put into it, whatever fits in that box is cool. So I think that's a question. That's the whole density question. The other way to is to
Yeah, but I bet you it's not cool right next door to some of these legislators. Just saying.
So ZEMIS.
Anyway, but
So
for our purposes, we should be adding some information on new housing types, typologies, and other kind of new uses that weren't necessarily in the last update we did to this was not that long ago. It was October 2019. John, you may not remember, but you might remember that we gave this presentation, you and I, and as soon as it was done is when Jeff Bowen resigned as president. Not related to it, but it was that same meeting.
So ZEMIS is a tool that we try to make sure everyone is aware of the tools that are at their disposal. Tons of public information. about what is on certain, where the zoning is, and also how to use tools of reporting, how to contact the city without getting mired and say, who do I tell if something is going on? So there's all these public tools that are, once you get used to them, readily accessible. So we want to make sure everyone knows their tools.
Okay.
Typing as well. That's the website. I can't remember what this is, Laura.
Right, I understand, but what we learned subsequent to that, we learned how to look at recent applications on a map. So should be adding a slide or two about that, because
So
that's incredibly useful.
Okay. Going down further, we focused in on what the ZMIS map looks like in our area. This is there, north of Washington, yellow, orange, pink, what each one green, what each one means. ZMIS snapshot, Jefferson Park area, and then basically going through the types of zones there are. There are 3 Cs. We often deal with bigger projects in the C zone. We also see a lot of projects in R3 and R4. And then R1 and RD 1.5, which are below that, lower density, always come up. So we are looking to make sure everyone knows when they see something, what that means and what it could mean. ZMIS, you can zoom in and see footprints and measurements and street widths. There's all sorts of information. And then all the bars on the left, when you unhinge these, tons of information about sites, including historic preservation information. You can click on it, and if you're in a historic zone, you can go right to that PCIS page that shows if the building is historic, or go to Survey LA, that's all in there. The zoning string, this is all, and one thing we need to, Laura, is maybe we have a section on what the new zoning code is going to look like.
Yeah.
So this is all being replaced in the next few years. Some neighborhoods already have it. This is called Euclidean zoning, where it's all based on use. That's what we have now. It's all going to form-based, where they have these formulas about
Have they really adopted that yet anywhere?
Boyle Heights, Chinatown. And I know they're gradually rolling out, but there's enough there that you can start to see where it's going. I think, knowing the city, they say it's going to be fully rolled out in 2 to 3 years. I think that's probably more like 5 to 10, but it's gonna upset everything. But there's a relearning process. It's kind of scares me because my whole career is built upon what this that year.
Well, we should actually explore that, because it can only roll out when they redo a community plan, and
Yep.
And our community plans for UNNC anyway are not expected to be redone for another 20 years or 18 at this point. So that's an interesting concept, but if we're going to try and teach this citywide, we'll have to add slides.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we have to draw the line of where we litigate and argue, and how do we just inform to say, be aware, this is how it's going to work in the future, big picture. I'm just taking notes on community plans.
Yeah, here I am too. Form zoning.
And then we did some real world examples. By right, defining that comes up a lot. By right means you're conforming to the zone. When do we have a say? And this is always said, I think, an issue that comes up in any jurisdiction that is a board or a body that is advising. Where do the powers start and end? And when, if there is a line, how do we get over that line? How can we let our voice heard, even if something is by right? We're going to run into that quite a bit more, because with state density bonuses, there's a lot more things going to be by right, and it's going to take a lot more will, like we had with 1848 Gramercy, to get our voices heard, because technically by state law that is allowed, but our voice was strong enough and clear enough that it got up to the CPC, and they're questioning what's happening with that. So anyway, seeing where those lines are, I think is a really good thing, so we know how we can maneuver and where we can go. Steve.
Are you going to cover CEQA as well?
Yes.
We'll remember when we get there, Steve. Either we did or we didn't.
Okay.
So this is more about by right, how do we make a decision? Okay, this has been 3 years.
Yeah, this page was literally because we were actually in a training. We asked individual people those questions and had discussions around each one of the questions, if you recall.
So on the 101, if we go bring it to a roadshow, there'll probably be less interaction, will be more presentation.
Right.
But I think as a neighborhood council, we can make it interactive just to hit it home about where, so people get a feel for, if you want to have a viewpoint, what's the most effective way to get your viewpoint heard and know where it can be effective. HPOZs and specific plans are nuances to the code, they're overlays to the base zone. Residential character overlays, we have them as part of our CPIO throughout South LA and West Adams, Baldwin Hills, Lamert. Talked a little bit, this is a specific plan that we talked about. We have more we can talk about. We just want to give it a sense that they can be about areas, they can be about streets, just be about just about anything. And HPOZ is technically a type of specific plan.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
In terms of contextualizing this for an audience, when I'm certainly not as well versed as all of you are on these issues, but when I talk to folks about it, I talk about this committee and its role as having a real profound impact on the life, business, and welfare of our community. And I think really pushing on that context brings a certain vibrancy and life to the discussion about what can be very arcane issues and dealings, because everything about our environment that we live and work in within the UNNC is impacted by planning and zoning. Not necessarily this committee, but by the activities of planning and zoning by the city.
And that sounds like, if I can summarize, to really give almost an inspirational introduction about why this is important, how it is important, and that we do have power, and it's how we use that power in a really real way. It's almost in some ways, because the world functions around us versus we're almost reactive. We're a reactive committee to what is going on around us. We need to know the tools versus some of the more proactive committees, like how do we clean up Washington Boulevard? How do we, I guess, maybe public safety is both proactive and reactive, but I think giving a contextual statement. So I wrote that down. That's great.
Okay, so
I think that would
Steve,
be helpful for people to understand. Really, that's not just about whether it's a C code or an X code or something. All these things have real life impact on people in our community.
Yep.
Wait, one more thing, Laura, and that the real role of this committee is to increase the quality of life of our community, right? Because all these things impact our quality of life in a very fundamental way.
Yep. Planning codes are essentially about the quality of life. I usually tell people the building code is about internal, the building looking in itself so it doesn't kill people, and the planning code is external, saying how the building affects its surroundings. That's how I usually put it all in a little digestible nut. And we said increase the quality of life, and then reactive. This is okay.
It's interesting because every one of these slides deals with where we live, how we live, who operates within the boundaries of the UNNC and how that's done. It's a pretty all-encompassing role that this committee plays.
Yep.
Yeah. Steve, what I was just trying to ask is I'm posting some of the stuff, but feel free to add. I didn't catch everything you said. So
that's I'm improvising.
I understand, and I'm typing as fast as I can. So feel free to look in the chat, and if I miss something, just add to it.
Thank you.
So this is new planning initiatives, new in 2019. TODs is almost a non-thing. TOCs are getting old, and they're up for renewal actually in 2025. CPIOs are a standby, but we have a new planning code, and like I said, we have all the ABs and SBs that are in front of us that did not exist 3 years ago. So I think that's that. And then the small subdivisions, those are becoming a little passe. ADUs are going on around us as we speak. We see them everywhere, and we often are surprised by them because by state law we do have no say in ADUs. But you have to trust that the planning department is doing its job adequately. So TOC, more on that. This was new back then, but this is.
Does the committee have a role in helping the city do its job right?
It depends, this committee, or do you mean land use committees in general for neighborhood councils?
Well, start locally and extend globally. To
Yeah,
the council.
well, our current problem is that there's one team assigned to different regions. You know, our region has a team of planners, the Valley has a different team. And it's all depends on whether the team will listen to you. So we're struggling right now with a team that isn't really collaborating. You know, it's like
Right.
You ask for information and they don't even respond. You know,
Yep.
you have to actually do a public records request to get the information that should have been just normal response. That does not appear to be the case in every corner of LA. So because they work, because they work in teams now, they're so used to working, each team works in a way that they're just comfortable working in that way. So if you've got a team leader who comes out of the side of the planning department where they hold community marketing kind of focus group meetings with community members, then the whole team will work that way. It's very interesting. So we don't enjoy that at the moment.
Is there a way, if we had a council person, to effectuate change in that culture?
What do you think, John?
I don't know.
Because I remember we're being recorded.
I don't know
Well,
how.
but I think this is legitimate discourse in a planning and zoning committee, especially when talking about a presentation.
I don't know how they choose teams, or they say, oh, grumpy West Siders get the good teams because they're grumpy and full of lawyers. And the poor folk in South LA get this other team, get this junior person who doesn't know what the hell they're doing. Who knows?
Well, it's more than that, because John, I end up now going to so many of these public meetings, and at least one person who's on our team seems to feel no compunction against saying rude things about community members. Kind of, you know, I'm being so nice. I look at Teresa. I mean, really not saying nice things, but sort of blaming the victims.
Right. So I guess my question is, what role can this committee and the neighborhood council play in changing that culture?
So I do know that the smarter we are and the more, my eyes were open in the last CPC here when we presented 1848 South Gramercy, where they actually said in public, this neighborhood council does not sound like NIMBYs. They sound like this, they have presented a case that really shows that this is running against everything that they're working for, and we should support that. They said that in public. And I was like, right. Thank you. So I think the more that we can be thoughtful, support things, find ways to support things, not support things that are obviously not working in our favor. So I find the more that we reach out, the more they reach out to us. I know people ask us, what do you think about this? The council office respects CD, our planning and zoning committee enough that they developer, we had the project on Washington and Manhattan Place. I think it was by right, but the council office came to us and said, this is by right or mostly by right. What do you guys think about it? Just so we know. They sought us out knowing that we weren't going to be like, so I think that's how we can make sure that we are involved. And I think that's helpful. Anyway.
Right.
So that might be something to discuss as part of your presentation, is that interface.
Yeah. Right. Because Steve, what's been frustrating me with the South LA team is a series of different applicants, and not the one John was just referring to, different applicants, different cases have said things in their applications or in hearings that were lies, and they were obvious lies. And the staff is not challenging them on their lies.
I hear you.
And
Yeah,
that's,
a lot of times they're hamstrung because the city can get sued if they, I know that 1848 South Gramercy, there was like, why are you guys not challenging?
well,
Well,
and also, I mean, along those same lines, I do not know, I understand state law says that there's only certain ways, means, not ways, that a city can now turn down certain kinds of housing projects when after they were deemed complete. They can ask as many questions as they want before the application is deemed complete, but afterwards they have to make a finding that approving this would create a public safety hazard, more or less. But I don't know why, if they discover fraud along the way, why they can't undeem it complete. Meaning, say, well, no, this application is no longer complete, which gives them the opportunity to turn it down without jumping through whatever hoops one would need to jump through to comply with the new state laws. And I frankly offended that we can't toss out fraudulent applications. So,
and then I would say the other thing is, when do we litigate things like this? And how do we litigate without effectively saying this does not work? How do you affect that change and say, how do we get it so staff can challenge without them being fearful, whatever, it's fear.
Well, one of our,
that's the politics of it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say one of the entities that's an applicant on one of the cases in our community, they don't stick to our community. So that, I'm not going to say who, but that particular applicant also has a parcel in the valley, and the parcel's zone is single family, R1, or similar to R1. It's sort of R1 agricultural, but its overlaying plan is some sort of commercial. So the request was to build 60 units on a single parcel, and the planning department refused to take the application. And that developer is suing the city on the same Sacramento law basis. So, I think the city understands it's a very difficult situation to be in.
So moving on, this is more about TOC. I can see this bringing down the exposure. TOC was hot 3 or 4 years ago, and it's being usurped by density bonus. This is just educational things about transitional height, which is always an issue. What is permanent supportive housing, which does affect how density bonus is applied, and what is by right. This has blossomed. Essentially, if you have 100% affordable housing or 100% permanent supportive housing, the zoning code basically, I'm not going to say dissolves, but the city is so having to provide housing that they can say no to very little when it's providing affordable housing. HHH, we can break an update on that, but that's even that's running its course as well.
Oh, yeah, and we would need to add, you're going to write that, we need to add a slide right there about the sustainable CEQA thing. The new kind of CEQA for affordable. Where it says CEQA is also relaxed, we should add a slide.
Yeah. CEQA is actually, it's more than relaxed now.
Yeah, well, that too.
So CEQA, Steve, you asked about CEQA. I think an introduction to CEQA is so multi-tentacled that I think we always seem to introduce people to it because it's a tool that sometimes can be used and sometimes not. California Environmental Quality Act. But I think maybe that's where is CEQA today might be a good thing to introduce. Because there's definitely.
Is it still applicable for commercial sites like gas stations and oil drilling and things like that?
I'm not sure when CEQA kicks in. I know there's as far as land use goes, not environmental hazards like that. That CEQA is they're really trying to get CEQA out of urban zones. Except, and I think historic things still apply, and Native American sites still apply, or trees still apply, but
right. Well, it's also, this is being litigated quite a bit on small projects all over town, because right now the city is pretty much exempting giving categorical exemptions to most quote, urban infill projects. And I'm not sure how it's going for the city in court. What the city has also done is made the developers responsible for the costs, no matter what. So it seems that they're not therefore tracking the success in court of holding up the categorical exemptions, because it does not have a financial impact on the city any longer if they lose.
So we had a section on, where we might see development. I think we can reassess whether that's how that might be looked at. Section about design, we have some design say, because I think developers often value about our viewpoints of our neighborhood, because they might not see things that we see every day. So I think they do value design. A lot of the design at HPOZs is all about design, and we're more about the planning zoning part of it. So I think we can show when design does come in and how we effectively can affect the design of a project. Just some talking about design. I could probably limit this down. This was my section. This is being interactive about what you like and what you don't like and why. And also talking about scale and how the size and scale aren't necessarily the same thing. A building can be well scaled, but be very large, and a building can be very awful and very small. So I think it's like where because it's something that's so discretionary. So talk about design. I put this slide in because Jefferson Park Terrace is pretty much well received in the neighborhood. And then some more, again, talking about design and how larger buildings can be diminished in their feeling and how they fit. And more, so this is a lot about.
Right, well, what's interesting, if you want to go back up to before we hit historical, this is the Broadway Palace. Those are pretty massive buildings when you drive by, but they're nicely designed. We probably should add a slide that shows, or a slide or two of the bads, since we're now getting some rather awful proposals. So, I mean, all of these, with the exception of the downtown one we're looking at now, were 4 or 5 stories. Because in 2019, it felt like 4 or 5 stories was pretty big. So anyway, just a thought.
So we had some slides about historic and then potentially adaptive reuse. Laura and I touting our successes and preserving some buildings, and then more about historic. Multiple approvals this gets a little wonky. I think that's been somewhat resolved, but Laura,
it's been resolved. And then there are no more things that are called granny flats. So that's gone.
And then somewhat cynically sarcastic, why can't it just be a park?
Well, because we're asked that all the time.
I know that's right.
We are asked it all the time. So that's why we had that. So I mean, I think we're going to need to fine tune some of what's in there, but we are missing pieces.
So I like to talk about rip the Band-Aid off of NIMBYism and YIMBYism, because I think no one likes to be tarred in other ways. Each one has its tarring aspects to it. And I think boxing ourselves in any way is not a good thing. And so I think I'd like to talk about that and I don't want us to be either of them. I want us to be, how do we not be a NIMBY and not be a YIMBY and be thoughtful and effective? And that's where I really want to dig in to really make sure that everyone's approaching it with, with facts and processes and their discretion and their feelings, all the above. So
John, I wrote, what is a NIMBY? What is YIMBY, spelled wrong, and how I spelled it wrong again. I really don't want to be thought of as a yimpy, but what is there now a nickname that's in between NIMBY and YIMBY?
NIMBY.
How can we help in our backyards?
NIMBYs, no. maybe in my backyard.
I don't think so. How can we help?
So I think John, the concept about facts is really important. And we do have case studies to demonstrate that when you go in with real facts, you can actually change.
Yep.
Or make change. So for example, the closure of the 4th Avenue drill site would not have happened without the intense investigation and presentation of facts to the city, not only about the site, but about the rules that govern oil drilling, et cetera. So when this committee with the community went to the city about that, the city became responsive over a period of time because we kept drilling the facts, not to pun there. But, and I think there are other examples that we could provide to show people, because oftentimes what you get is this emotional response, right? There's this, there's that, but it's not really based in anything that the city can take action on.
I agree, and I don't want to dismiss emotion because that drives us. And I think all of us were viscerally offended by certain projects that rather than going and say, I hate this, why is this happening? Say, this is not working, this does not fit because this, and this.
That's right.
So I think I always want to let the passion drive, but let the facts persuade.
Right. And also, how do we help identify the facts that are relevant at a hearing versus relevant at a community meeting where the elected officials are present? Two different things.
But those are all really important points. But again, it's got to be informed by the facts. Otherwise, the emotion alone is not going to carry us.
Yeah. So, for example, I was at the South LA APC yesterday on a matter not near us, but not here. But several of the testifiers, people who live in the community, kept talking about how they not only don't want this project that was proposed, but they want the current tenant, who has a great sort of destination business, to stay because he helps the neighborhood. Well,
is that the Metropolis site?
No, it's the Dalton and Adams. It's the proposed 10 small lot subdivision for 10 things. So, and it's Nick Metropolis, but it's like, it's not relevant that he's great for the community or he brings people there. And then it's relevant, but it's not relevant to a planning decision. Certainly relevant to the economic revitalization of a community. It's relevant to the purposes of the CPIO, but they weren't stating it like that. So it's learning how to say something to the effect of, we have a neighborhood serving commercial CPIO. The current business is a good example of that. The general purpose of having the CPIO is to improve the economic activity. And that's not what this student housing project is about. I mean, but they didn't say it like that. They were more lauding the business.
But you see, Laura, I think you made a really critical point here, which is the purpose of the presentation. One of the purposes or purposes is to help people speak the language of the decision makers, because you can't be involved in the decision making if they don't understand what you're talking about, because you're not speaking their language. And I think that's a real critical point that you're raising, Laura, that the board and the community need to really understand. We need to learn how to speak their language. Otherwise, they're not going to understand our concerns.
And I think also we have our core group here, our usual suspects, I hate to call it that. So I think a lot of people that do attend that may benefit the most, I think we as leaders and usual suspects shouldn't feel shy about saying, now it's the time for us to talk about how we present what we want and how to get it. And so I think as long as we have that unabashed approach, saying, great, thank you for that. What I hear, what you say, they've never been in planning and zoning, and they come forth and say, I hate this project, I hate it. As a planning and zoning committee, this is what we do to take what you observe, what you're feeling, and what you know is happening in your block, and translate that into something that can be effective.
Excellent.
So I think we have to just get that approach as a group, and then we also say it in the presentation. Our job is to do this. Exactly.
Excellent point.
So we're here to listen, and for people to vent. We can certainly vent here, but we aren't here to create a firestorm. We're here to affect change, and how we do that, whether firestorm or something else, is up to
Right. And the people who make the decisions speak a specific language. And if we don't engage them in their language, they won't understand what we want. And in fact, they're handcuffed in making a decision that we want because we haven't used their language.
Yep. And because if we don't do that, we get eye rolls, and then we get, oh, look at the wild eyes, and we get the little passing comments, and they say, oh, don't listen to that neighborhood. I hear it. I work for developers. That neighborhood council is crazy. Just just ignore them, because everything they're going to say is crazy.
But, you know,
So,
like planners and zoning administrators, they're not beholden to translate what we're presenting. We have to translate it to them.
Correct.
Well,
Politicians
it's also
often aren't smart.
become more than that of late. It's they're not, sometimes they are looking for a hook to hang their effort on, but more often than not, they're looking for a way to ignore things, what the community says. And I hear that, you know, I keep hearing at hearings where the staff presents, well, nobody brought this up before, and so our decision is what it, our recommendation, our staff report is what it is, despite what we're hearing today, because it wasn't brought up before. And that's obviously, how do you bring everything up before, when everybody needs time to not just percolate, but hear what other people are saying, and then you bring it up. But they're also, in the past, on CEQA in particular, if a historic consultant who happens to live in a community anywhere said, in my opinion, blah, 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 is historic, or in my opinion, blah, 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 there's going to be an air quality issue. It just doesn't matter. But they're not the hired consultant for the project. Staff is now not taking that written opinion as an element in decision making. And for CEQA, when it's supposed to be, when there's a difference of opinion, you can't give a categorical exemption. You have to explore it a little more, and at least do a mitigated negative declaration. Again, things that we didn't say in this presentation. I think John, I think when we did this, we must have been shying away from including CEQA, because I'm realizing as I'm talking, all of this is not there. So that may have been like maybe our idea when we first did this back in 2014, the first file I have. We may not have we may have purposely kept CEQA out of it. But in any case, CEQA says if there's a difference of opinion, the decision maker is supposed to go up a notch and do just that little bit of extra exploration. And now what the staff is basically doing is saying none of those other opinions matter. The only opinion that matters is the hired hand expert consultant that the developer paid.
I think that's really good backstory information. But I think in terms of the presentation, it would be important to really stay focused on how we can do things rather than how we're roadblocked.
Right, but maybe the how we can is identify experts who are on the city list. I mean, in other words, I don't know. I mean, just
that'd be fine. But again, I think it's really important in giving this kind of presentation to talk about how we can do things and empower people to do things rather than what other people are doing to try to stop us.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, I think we kind of danced around this a little bit. Bureaucrats and politicians, they need translation. They don't want to spend as little time as possible on whatever they're doing. They need translation, they need cover, and they need us to do their thinking for them.
That's right.
And I saw the CPC when we presented 1848 South Gramercy. We gave them well-formed ideas and arguments that they then could co-opt in a good way. Say, oh yes, that is a good point. It may not be successful in the end, but at least they can say, we got to listen to that, because that's well-formed. So I think, that approach. So we talk a lot of our level of this conversation is up here, and I want to make sure that we're getting the base down, because I think, we do have the zoning review, but it can get overwhelming really, really fast to people who are just walking into the room for the first time.
Right. And we want to get people to a position where they're not rolling, where their eyes aren't rolling in back in their head when this kind of stuff comes up, right? That they have an engaged and informed participation, not only on the board, but in our community.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know that we can do a presentation that, we don't, I don't think John and I have the bandwidth to alter presentations for, depending on who the audience is. So
Yeah.
you absolutely, when we take this to the 23-member governing board and it's part of a retreat, there's going to be people who roll their eyes. There just are. But when we take it to another neighborhood council's land use committee, they're going to be very interested. And if we do it at the Congress of Neighborhoods, the people who sign up for it will be very interested, because there's 1,000 people, not all of them will sign up for a session, particular session. So, you know, I think we can go a little bit wonky, because we're going to definitely lose some board members, and we always do, but most of them will pay attention and be interested.
So
And
this is
John, the other
something-
thing that I realized we didn't put in this, and was it on purpose or did we not think of it? This started out as the alphabet soup thing, and it just kind of then grew as zoning and planning got more complicated. But the findings, we haven't addressed findings at all.
Yeah, so
And
define-
one effective thing, because every decision maker, whether it's the planning commission or the city council or what, when they make their motions, they're adopting the proposed findings that the staff report has given them to adopt. So one effective method, potentially effective method to get them to do a different motion is to present alternative findings that are legal.
I've written
And is that
findings.
too complicated for this kind of presentation?
It might be a little, to me, what I'm getting out of this conversation is how we approach managing our meeting, whether someone's there for the first time or whether we're all well versed, how do we get to where we need to go in a language that everyone agrees upon. I think giving the basic outline. And I just had another thought, something that didn't exist 3 years ago, recording it, rehearsing it, recording it, and saying, we recommend that anyone who comes to planning and zoning look at our 45-minute video about the nuts and bolts, and make it a requisite.
Oh, yeah.
That would
Right.
be
So when we
great.
really do it, we just do it and we don't talk around like this.
Yeah, so that would make it, the presentation a little bit different, that we have a 45-minute, slideshow with partially or mostly scripted that covers the nuts and bolts like the planning department did, but way better, because we all know the planning department one was so just cold and wonky, like so fear-based, like we can't see anything that's gonna
Well,
rattle someone and fire.
but how do we handle the part about how do you make these decisions? Because that was really good, that interactive session piece in the middle. But how do we do that for something like this?
So I think we can have it in two parts. I think we can have the basic recorded version and then have the interactive portion. But that's going to take some thought. That's a showwomanship thought thing. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay, so we're at an hour.
Yeah.
I think we have a
I'm gonna
lot
have
of
to go
fodder, and I also want this. I want the whole show to be brilliant and better than the planning department for volunteer work. And so I think this is good. And if anyone has any other suggestions, send them along to Laura, and I will be developing it and see what happens.
Well, not just suggestions, but cool slides.
Yeah, approaches, what juxtapositions, things like.
Well, part of the brilliance, if I may say so myself, of John and I effort here, and it wasn't just us, but we found really good examples, visual examples. Thank you, Steve.
I'm just acknowledging your brilliance, Laura.
What can I say? No, but if you look,
Finally, the
we
truth
went through it
comes out.
really fast.
Brilliant,
Okay, I'm
brilliant.
sorry. We went through it really fast, but the point is, if you've taken the planning 101, where it's just kind of, it's hard to follow and it's not very interesting and it's not very thorough. everything that we are saying in words has a pretty good image to support it,
Mm.
right? It's visual storytelling. So if you come across any other examples of visual storytelling images, please shoot those along too, because we can build the narrative, from these notes or other. But I think that's part of, I'm going to say it again, the brilliance of this kind of presentation is that it also has that storytelling.
Yep, I think it's a good point. I can tell you I used to give about 50 to 60 talks a year on different issues at UCLA, and cartoons work great. Everyone loves a good cartoon and they remember the cartoons.
I love that. NIMBY cartoons.
Yeah, people at meetings saying stupid things, with little thought bubbles, and cartoons people remember, and people have become less and less readers and more visual.
Yeah.
So I think you're making an important point, Laura, to use the visual medium.
Yep. Okay, let's move on. It's 8 o'clock. So the next portion is going to be unless any other comments from anybody? Not Laura, me, or Steve. Okay. Okay, thanks everybody. So moving on, Laura, do you want to take the next item, please?
Yeah, I am looking for the HPOZ ordinance. Here, I've got it.
Oh, is this for educational purposes? What again is the purpose of this?
Yeah, we had-
have to go in a few minutes.
There was an opening in an HPOZ in our area that had an appointment to it that did not sit well with the community, and it seemed to be ill-gotten through some political process that wasn't on the up and up. So I think, and then there's a question about what power do we have to affect those choices, or what power don't we have? And so I think that it was a question from stakeholders. So Laura and I thought we'd be educational to just review.
Right. So,
unfortunately,
and of
I have
course
to go. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
okay, so John, I know you asked me to sort of do this, but the question is what exactly should we be doing with this? I mean, I will start by saying we have
we all live in HPOZs. What do we think?
Yeah. Well, we have a 34-page ordinance. So I guess I could just quickly. Is this up on the screen?
Yep.
Okay. It has the purpose. It states the purposes. It states a bunch of definitions. So and Teresa has her hand up.
All right, Laura, just maybe to help kind of frame what Donna and I would like to get more information on, is that in the West Adams Terrace HPOZ, it has 5 members on the board. Is that also the case for Jefferson Park and the other 3 HPOZs within the UNNC footprint? And do they all have the same 2 appointments from planning, 1 from the community, 1 from the council district, and 1 from someone else I can't remember right now?
The mayor.
Yeah, the mayor's office. So if you could explain that.
Right.
We just want to have a deeper understanding of that.
Okay. So the answer is a 5-member board, and then Harvard Heights and Western Heights have been combined into a single. I'm getting a note that my internet connection is unstable, but they've been combined into a single board, even though they remain as 2 HPOZs with 2 different preservation plans. So they have a 7-person board. It stays 1 appointment from the mayor. It stays 1 architect. But then the other appointments from the council office are divided between the 2, and it's based in part on the number of properties. So Harvard Heights gets more seats than Western Heights because Harvard Heights is so large. So you can see that it says that at least 3 members of a 5-member board would have to be people who live within the board. And I'm not sure if it's 7 that they don't increase that because they don't really address that.
And each member has a 4-year term. And let's, I mean, we can talk about all 4 HPOZs, but in particular, the West Adams Terrace,
Well,
which goes over to Kennedy Heights.
it says in the ordinance that it's 4 years, but they can continue to serve until a replacement is appointed. So I will say I know one person on one board, not here, who's been serving about 20 years because never been reappointed. The appointing entity has not reappointed anyone. And there's a couple of things that don't really happen. The mayor has not appointed anyone for quite a long time to any HPOZ. So there's a lot of boards around town who are missing that final member. If in theory, if the entity that's supposed to do the appointing doesn't do it, then the president of the city council should do it. But no one is very willing to ask the president of a city council to do it in an area where that person doesn't reside, because, so it doesn't happen often. So essentially the mayor is supposed to be the entity that appoints someone who has extensive real estate or construction experience. I mean, this is what we see on the screen. Council member appoints someone who's a resident in the preservation zone. And essentially sometimes if the HPOZ goes across 2 council districts, it's the council member who has the bigger chunk. That doesn't affect us,
Right.
but it does affect some area. So the Cultural Heritage Commission has 2 appointments. One is the architect.
And those are mainly, when we say cultural heritage, we're really meaning planning, the planning department.
We really mean the staff at the Office of Historic Resources.
Okay.
A combination.
Somebody,
Pardon?
is that Ken's office?
Well, it's Ken's office. On a practical basis, it would normally be Lambert Giesinger and or Shannon Ryan
Okay.
in conjunction with the planner assigned to the particular HPOZ. I will tell you that NANDAC or NANDAC, having faced multiple, they have 3 HPOZs within their boundaries, all of which were suffering from lack of members. And so in that case, NANDAC took it upon itself to start interviewing people and then writing letters to the elected, the council members to get people appointed. And it seems to have worked. But that was a different issue. That was the failure to have board members, not a line of people who had raised their hand. So essentially when it says Cultural Heritage Commission, it really is staff. And particularly on this seat number 4, one member who is a renter or owner of property, of late, it seems as if they're replacing board members who want to continue to serve, but perhaps have become thorns in their side in one case. Or, in other words, they're replacing people versus trying to get the mayor to fill vacancies.
But they're replacing them after their term. They're not replacing them in the middle of their term, correct?
Well, again, many people have served well past the 4 years. So,
but I understand that. But the boundaries, the ordinance says 4 years. So I don't want to exceed that in this conversation. If someone has, done their term of 4 years, then all bets are off for each one of these seats. If by chance they want to continue and there isn't a replacement, then that's fine. But in the case of a recent board HPOZ member was replaced, they had exceeded their 4-year term. Correct? I mean, you don't know that. But we know
yeah, that. Maybe, but if you see, I don't know if you can see my cursor.
I can. I see it.
Okay, The appointment may be rescinded at any time prior to the expiration of a member's term because the appointees serve at the pleasure of the appointing authority.
Right.
So it's interesting language because, as John knows, the idea of having a board made up of your peers and having public meetings in the community was to bring the community in on the decision making. So it does feel a little arbitrary when people are just removed because somebody else wants a seat or because perhaps they're not behaving in the way the staff wants them to. I mean, you know, in other words, but this certainly allows the appointing entity to simply remove someone.
Right.
And I think,
And we
I-
should-
yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, John.
I don't think that would happen very often. I think I think everyone after their 4 years, I was on University Park for 8, and I never had to reapply. I think it just lets you continue in the board without having to say I have to reapply or defend myself or compete. But I think if you're beyond your 4 years, and there is a vulnerability there. But I think if they replace someone before 4 years, that would be a political issue because that means they're really monitoring and saying, no, we don't like you, you're out. I think you have to do something pretty
And that-
egregious.
Yeah, I
that's
will say, John, things are a little different right now. There's some antagonism and somebody's being threatened with being removed, not from our area, somebody else. If his behavior, he's asking too many questions of staff at board meetings, questioning staff's actions sounds like it's becoming a reason for removal. So,
Well, I will say that a member of the HPOZ, West Adams Heritage and West Adams Terrace Board asked many, many questions and recently had a conversation with the planner, the staff person and her supervisor to review and get a better understanding why so many questions were being asked. So yeah, maybe they are, I don't know, but in that case, it wasn't an appointment from one of these two appointments, it was the one from the board. And mentioning that one, that is the one, when we say the board, we mean the Neighborhood Council Governing Board.
so seat number 5, where it says one member who is a renter or owner of property in the preservation plan, in the preservation zone. It is appointed by the board, but there is by the
Other members.
other 4 members of the board.
Of the
However-
HPOZ board.
Correct.
However, that seat, so this is where you get to number D here, they need to consider appointment suggestions from the certified neighborhood council.
Right.
So the neighborhood council and how that now works, essentially, the neighborhood council gets a letter from the Office of Historic OHR Resources, and they've come to understand they have to give at least 6 to 8 weeks notice, not 4 weeks notice, so that the neighborhood council will do whatever its process is to determine who they would like to recommend to the board, and they need to vote. So, although this says 45 days or at least one certified neighborhood council meeting has been held, whichever comes first. Then they have to tell the board the recommendation. And then the board can do with that what it wishes.
So when there's a vacancy, does the neighborhood council look toward the homeowners associations to put forth community members, or does the board, does the neighborhood council board itself handle that?
The neighborhood council, in any neighborhood council, would do its own normal outreach, presumably. I mean, it would create a process and do its outreach. I know this better. I feel like what is not allowed anymore is for HPOZ board members to do their own outreach. I think that's now forbidden, correct?
I don't know, but let's just go just to this seat number 5.
Well, it's the one they're calling D here.
Right,
Our seat 5 is D here.
is D, yes.
What's your comment?
Oh, am I fading out? Sorry, John.
No, I said, what's your comment?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
that the West Adams Avenues put forth a recommendation, then that went to the neighborhood council, which then made a recommendation to the HPOZ board. Was that the sequence? Is that a normal sequence?
Yes, but on a practical basis, it's not usually the neighborhood association who makes a recommendation to a neighborhood council. Here, that's not how we've handled it. We just use the MailChimp kind of process and
Okay,
post it on social media. But that doesn't mean it couldn't happen that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And then candidates come in and then they're just like our regular board process for vacancies on our board. They come in and they talk a little bit why they would like to participate. Then we provide a recommendation to the HPOZ board.
Right.
Sure.
And obviously, if you read this, we are not precluded from saying 2 people are qualified. I mean,
Right.
our process, we've created a process. We could create a different process. I don't know why necessarily we would, but
Okay, no, I understand that. I really want to talk about the
Yeah.
council member appointment. And
Sure.
even though they certainly have the right to appoint whomever they choose,
Right.
in the past, or I think in the case with Ed, and maybe Donna can chime in here, she actually presented that position to the council district, suggesting that this person is qualified and would like to do it, and that's who they went with. But recently, they didn't even reach out. And this is all, I wanted to chime in on this when Steve brought it up. Who's in charge over there? We have, this appointment, not that I would do that, of course, but legally, could it be contested? Did Councilmember Wesson actually have the ability to make these appointments during his tenure? So I feel like when we get our council member, it's incumbent upon us to have a better relationship with our council district.
Chiming in,
Yeah,
when our last one, and that was it, we reached out because we had an empty seat. We reached out amongst the area, both Kenny Heights, our area, and all around, and tried to find people who might be interested in wanting to serve on HPOZ. We reached out to the council office and said, this person is interested. We could have given 2 names. They basically discussed it with us, and that's how Ed got appointed to the position. And they spoke to him. So we've never had a problem with getting input. And we've always had a good relationship with Council District 10 regarding issues, because they'd ask us, what does the community want, through our deputy. So it hasn't been an issue. How this happened after the person in particular said they didn't like the HPOZ and wanted to join so they could put their stamp on it. At that point, it bothered me. So that's why I'm in the position, and we went to the meeting and spoke out. Because, we try to work as a team partnership with the 10, and we always have been able to. So it was really, this particular person had some pull, and we believe they used it. So that's my take.
Well, I will tell you historically, on both the West Adams Terrace, and then I think, John, you'll chime in on Jefferson Park. When we were initially trying to fill all 5 seats, in other words, when it was first started. So in the case of both of these neighborhood councils, UNNC convinced the council office to tell the planning department that UNNC would conduct at least some of the would be in lieu of an HPOZ board until there was an HPOZ board, to hear at least some cases. For West Adams Terrace, we didn't hear the minor things, but we did consider and have 2 meetings regarding the Victorian house that was moved on to St. Andrew's Place, for example, because there was no West Adams Terrace board. And John and I and several others served almost a year, I think, for Jefferson Park, right? if you recall. But at the same time, Sylvia Lacey, who was the like Mary now, they sent out postcards. I mean, it was a different era. Sending postcards to people's homes actually was something people did, and said there's vacancies on neighborhood council, at least for West Adams Terrace they did. And also the planning department did as well. So there was outreach to gauge interest, to see who would even want to be appointed. And that's obviously didn't happen now. And John, how has it been happening in Jefferson Park in the last couple of years, if you know?
It's been functioning fairly normally. When we had a seat open that was the board choice, we got 2 candidates from the neighborhood council. One was preferred, but there was a second place person. We eventually voted on the second place person, mostly because the first place person didn't show up at the meeting when they needed to.
Right.
So we said, well, yeah, we got some over there too, and that's worked out fine. So
But how about the council office appointments? How were they done over the years?
That was empty forever, and it was just filled with someone I don't know, but it was filled with an appointee, and I don't know how the community feels about it.
Right, because I will tell you that Carol was appointed by the council office for Western Heights now, on that 7-person board, not as the architect, but as the resident rep by the council office. And I don't know how it happened, meaning I don't know if she just said, hey, I'll do it, or if postcards went out, or if Western Heights had, like West Adams, like West Adams Avenues might, if they had a meeting and said she's our choice. I just don't know how it happened.
Well, we've always been able to throw a name in the hat because they didn't know and they didn't push it. It was definitely throw a name in the hat, say this person lives here, has interest, and we were able to get them appointed. It wasn't a battle, and if we had 2 names, we would have thrown. But it was definitely someone who wanted to do it, who actually wrote, I think, a letter or something, and it went from there.
So
and it wasn't like this was a vacant seat, as the case in Jefferson Park. I mean, there was someone who was serving admirably, was the chair of the committee. It was, as far as I could tell, doing a great job. So
the one for us? Ed.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. And like I said, his tenure was in around the 8th year, but the point being, it should not have been done in the way it was done. It should have been put out to the people. If he showed, I don't think he minded leaving. Several of them said, we're, like Natalie, she's at her point. She's ready to leave. And she's
a mayoral appointee, so she leaves, it's just vacant.
Yes.
Then not a good idea.
Right. So at that, it's like that. And all of them are in the 8, 9, 10 year, our board members have been there a long time.
Right.
But this situation was untenable, and I wrote a letter and I notified them that we were very uncomfortable with it. And this is not typical of our partnership with the town. So.
Right.
And also I will say that it's not, first, I wholly concede that it's council district seat, they can do whatever they want. I'm not arguing that. But this is not a person who had been living in the community for a while, who participated in meetings, who had, been engaged in the community in some way, even if they were not well known or even well liked by the community. It's somebody who, had been involved. And that wasn't the case. And it feels like it reeks of cronyism, just to be quite honest. The person's husband is a former political appointee or political position in the city. And it just feels really, it doesn't feel good, just to be quite honest. This is why people get upset about government when things like this happen.
Right.
Well, Teresa spoke out at the meeting and I spoke out, and it won't be the last time. I'm sorry, but we're going to go to the meeting and we're going to make our feelings known.
So I have a question because I was there for the 6 minutes. I mean, I logged off of the APC meeting. I came to West Hams Terrace and I went back to APC. Was it further addressed at any point later in the meeting?
Nope.
I left shortly after public comments. I mean, we
Oh.
just spoke at public comments, so
It
there's
wasn't agendized.
no, I mean,
Well, there's always the board staff, communications. So we've never seen, I mean, no, I wouldn't have seen, but there's no letter of introduction, no resume, no.
no, I don't think so. I mean, I can find out later, but I think that she did introduce her or something. And then I think in a future meeting, they're going to have election of officers. So I don't know.
Well, she's very clear on how we feel. And after that, the couple of comments we made, the two of us, she turned her camera off and went quiet.
She turned her camera off?
Yeah.
Well, she's a board member. That's not supposed to. All right. Okay.
Laura, she
Well,
turned her
it was-
camera
Oh,
off.
all right. So,
But all being that, it was her first meeting. So you never, technology,
Yeah.
people,
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
sure, Teresa.
okay. So you guys, I'm looking at the clock and we have some other things, but I did want to bring up because the other thing that's in the ordinance that was a big change and is not a problem at West Adams Terrace so far. Well, maybe, but has become a matter of discussion. I'm saying that in a nice way at other HPOZ boards is this new thing, review criteria. So when they updated this ordinance not too long ago, they made two kinds of conforming work. And one is minor conforming work for contributing elements. That's for buildings which are contributors, and major conforming work. And many things that are in major conforming work used to be certificate cases. So they have a price because minor conforming work, if I understand correctly, is still free for the application, but their price is much lower than for certificates. But there's been some conflicts lately where staff has decided to put on the agenda in the category major conforming work where board members are objecting and saying, no, it should have been a certificate case. And it's become quite testy. And basically staff has now issued some memos saying, we get to decide what, it's our decision, it's our role to decide what category a thing is. Is it a major conforming or is it a certificate case? And trying to explain to board members that their job is not to make that decision, but rather they get to decide whether or not the work is really conforming to the preservation plan. So that, I know that sounds technical, but what staff is now saying with great specificity, we decide where it sits on the agenda, but you can decide that it doesn't meet whatever the preservation plan guidelines are. And John, I don't know if you I know you're not on the Jefferson Park Board now, but was this becoming an issue still were?
No.
Or were you lucky to miss this moment?
I missed this moment.
Yeah. So, yes, Teresa.
I will say that what I have noticed, and this is what was explained to me, is that staff, I think it's under the minor conforming work, like someone put in a skylight and it was brought to our attention, they put a skylight in. And I said, James, did that not come up before HPOZ? And then he talked to Deepika and she said, there are certain things that staff is making the decision on. They're not going to come to the board. So
yeah, it's called a delegated decision. So
Yeah.
every preservation plan is different as to what is or what is not delegated. And again, this gets a little complicated. There's 8 HPOZs who wrote very, very, very detailed plans a while ago. Then there were 16 more HPOZs at that moment in time that had not yet done preservation plans, and the city created a template. So all of those 16 HPOZs pretty much had to, check boxes on a template, and it generated their preservation plan. And one of the set of boxes is what things are delegated and what things are not automatically delegated. So code enforcement across the board is not delegated. If somebody gets caught, they got to go to the board. And part of that idea was to present themselves hand in hand, to the community and hear what the community has to say about them violating and getting caught in code enforcement. Then after that, the next HPOZ after that was Jefferson Park. So we were allowed to take the template, but then write a real preservation plan just following the guidelines of the template, because they weren't doing it all at one fell swoop. So Jefferson Park's preservation plan almost became a template for some others. So there's the 16 who have the real templated, and that includes West Adams Terrace. It's just a template. So yeah, so if Deepika says skylights are delegated, it probably is that skylights are delegated.
Well, I'm trying to say thank you and John very much for allowing us to have this discussion, putting it on the agenda and allowing us to have this discussion tonight. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Teresa.
Doc?
Great. So our next, any other comments, questions on HPOZs? We obviously can talk about it anytime we want. Ongoing in our ongoing cases. So hearing none, we were asked by the new president, Greg Jackson. All committees were asked to come up with their goals for the year. Hopefully, I think this could be pretty painless. I think out of all the committees,
Well,
ours is
yeah,
very,
but
very
it could be
clear.
painless. And by the way, it looks like we're the only one doing it this month. So if we fail to complete the task, we're okay.
I have sketched out, I have 4 areas in which we operate, and I'm going to share them with you.
Okay.
The first one is the most obvious, which is the hearing of cases. Things come before us, they need to be acted upon, and we listen and act upon them appropriately. So number 1, hearing of cases. Number 2, education and engagement. That would be the planning 101 and just engaging the neighborhood with planning and zoning. The number 3 is effectively contributing to ongoing city policy development. This would be things like the housing element. This would be things like listening, putting our ear to the ground and making sure that everything that's coming out of the city, whether it's the HPOZ policy, I know we had things about the fees that we reacted to. So listening to City Hall and writing whatever is appropriate response to that. And then the last one is proactive projects and our own UNNC policies, things that would come under this that don't necessarily have a specific case. Would be our Washington streetscapes, would be our tree policy, somewhat oil that is tied to a case, but that was also a very grassroots initiative. So that might be just a grassroots initiatives to affect change on our own vote, on our own drive. So those are the 4 things I have: hearing cases, education, engagement, city affecting change in city policy, and creating our own policies. Laura.
I have my hand up. So I would like to add to that.
Okay.
That we need to ask Taylor to tell us what our transportation goal 1 or 2 are. I mean, in other words, whatever. I hadn't thought about it this way, but obviously we have a transportation, mobility, and transit subcommittee, so we need to add that. Whatever meaning we can't do it here. He's not here. 2, I would like us to I don't know if this is a goal for the year, but it's certainly a goal for soon. So many of the affordable housing projects that we've approved are suddenly coming online. One actual goal as opposed to a generalized goal. I'd like to have a meeting where they come, each of them, and present their finished projects to us. And the third thing that we had talked about very briefly, but I'd like it as a goal, is engaging in some kind of outreach. I mean, whether it is like Mar Vista does with the door hangers or signage, you know, this property will have a public hearing at UNNC. I mean, you know, some sort of outreach to engage people in particular case processing.
So what I'm hearing there is that we can have our general, these are the things we do throughout the year, and we'll take things as they come up. But then we have a specific, we can start
couple
creating a specific list of these are the things that we're going to focus on specifically, and they
Right.
might fall into those other categories, but there's
Right.
very specific. And
Well, the outreach component might ultimately include a budget request. Might cost money. And the other thing you didn't mention up above, I mean, I think you can just fold it into one of those sentences, but we have been doing some community impact statements. And that's probably something we might want to continue.
and I think they usually are about our projects, about
No. I mean, like the building with wood versus concrete.
that would be the city policy.
Right. So in that category, just that might include community impact statements.
Okay, great.
Because I'd like to be able to continue as a committee to generate our own CISs. Because I am not sure, and Teresa went to last night's meeting, I did not. I'm not sure if Greg wants to reactivate the CIS committee, if he even mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
You're
think
mute.
also the Mills Act was under that category. The housing element was under that category. It's like listening to what the city's doing.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very, you know, we have, I'm just saying there might, well, for example, if this comes to pass, that piece of Sacramento legislation that's looking into social housing is what they're calling it. It sounds like Mike Bonin has also done a council motion on same topic. So if we wanted to do a community impact statement, then we could.
So just to be
And
clear,
there's a lot of ifs in that. So
so if we
And
want to
just
do
to be
it,
clear, I'm sorry, John. He did mention activating economic development. He may have mentioned CIS too. You know, I was packing, I was not 100% there.
Right.
So he may have mentioned that too.
right. So in other words, once CIS committee has become semi-defunct, several of our UNNC standing committees have just started proposing community impact statements in their bailiwick and their expertise. And I don't think that's a bad idea. You know, and certainly that doesn't mean we would do a whole bunch of them. But I'm just saying, just add to that whatever that was, number 3. What I don't have it in front of me, including possible CISs, and just call it a day.
and if we wanted, I think we could do that generally. We could also do something very measurable and say, write at least 4 proactive CIS or CS type input statements regarding pending city policies. Something like that. So it's measurable. So did we do our 4 this year?
Well, Greg likes nothing better than measurable things.
So I think so it sounds like we could do our general, what we do every week, and those will happen automatically. And then we can have maybe list some measurable ones.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I can, let me post what I just jotted down here, just so everyone can see it and maybe add to it. Maybe next meeting we can take an action.
Yeah, I feel like I feel that the committees are gonna, I'm not saying this right, like communications committee tomorrow night does not have this on their agenda. So they'll not take it up for another month.
Because we're brilliant. It's because we're brilliant.
No, well, that too, but I'm being compliant. He asked me to do it and I did.
Yeah, but we can't really look at the other committees. We just need to focus on our work
I
and
agree.
we're in the things that we're trying to accomplish. They get it, they don't get it, it's, you know.
So let's do this. We can take an action on this. Is this enough to go on, that we actually write something so we can give it to the governing board on time at the beginning of next month?
Well, I don't, that's what I'm asking is this, I don't know that this is an agenda item I didn't go last night to executive, so I don't know what the proposed agenda is.
Well, we can still.
We can be ready for, we'll have another meeting anyway, so we should ask Taylor for his thoughts on
Okay.
his subcommittee. We
Okay.
should ask Steve and Chris for their thoughts on the oil drilling subcommittee, not on the project, but on the, the city also now has pending motions on oil drilling in general, so we should ask them if there's anything that should be added to a list.
So I'm gonna, for my notes for the first meeting in August, I will make this discussion in action. And we'll
Sure.
reach out to Taylor and put this on the agenda. And maybe we'll do a sketch of what we already talked about. So
Perfect.
people know what they're walking into, and then we'll take actual vote and present it to the governing board the next day.
And John, are you thinking bullet points or a paragraph?
Probably bullet points. I'm a bullet point guy. Maybe lump them into two categories: ongoing and specific projects or something like that.
I'm just thinking about the formatting on the webpage. So every committee that submits their stuff, they all look the same to me.
So we're the leaders. If we're the only ones there, we get to lead the way and say, take our example and run with it.
We set the standard on how they have to do it, right?
Okay, so I'll put that on the agenda for next time, and we can wrap it up. Any other comments or questions or anything on that topic? Hearing none. Last follow-up on previous cases, I have a couple. Tomorrow, the Cultural Heritage Commission is having their hearing on Mills Act, which we wrote a pretty lengthy letter that was submitted a couple days ago. I will be presenting a 2-minute defense or presentation of our letter, and we'll see how that goes. That's tomorrow morning. We're late in the agenda, but it's not a packed agenda, so I'm guessing we'll probably.
It's really the agenda item for the day.
Yeah. So
Everything else are going to go through quickly.
So I'd appreciate it. I'm reticent a presenter because it takes a lot of brain energy to present in front of a commission. But if someone could be there listening, I will probably not be able to listen to the whole meeting. But Laura, if you could listen and
Yeah, I'm staying the whole time.
digest, thank you. So that's happening. Secondly, LAX Roundtable, for which we have a representative to the roundtable that we were given back in 2017 when Next Gen started affecting us, had a vibrant and lively meeting today that was full of, it got a little bit down and dirty because FA, people have been working hard on the issue, presented a long time ago. This is Jeff Thompson, who used to be in Mike Bonin's office, diligent about this topic, put together what they were calling Plan B to the FAA about diverting some planes down different routes that came down from the north just to ease up the pressure on this. And they really planned it out. FAA came back and said, basically, not feasible, not feasible, not feasible, not feasible, and did not back it up. They just came in and dug their heels and said, no, we're not going to do that. And there was an eruption of anger. And Jeff Thompson was angry. Jackie Hamilton from Karen Bass's office was there. She was angry. Diane Lawrence was there. She was angry. Someone from the Valley was there, and it was Timmy. She was angry. And then Jean, the chairperson, tried to wrangle it all in, and they basically didn't take it. And they said, we want you to come back and tell us why. And we're pissed off. And so it was a really good meeting for us to be at, and it's ongoing, and we're still fighting the FAA.
Do you think a letter, not from us, to Pete Buttigieg could potentially fix this in the short period of time, possibly that we still have a Democratic administration?
Who wants to write a letter to Pete Buttigieg? I don't know.
Well, Lizzie was very excited. He actually was right here at the opening for the Crenshaw Expo station.
Cool. I didn't know that.
I was there. That is a perfect example. I went to that early because first they gave me full access to those sycamores, so I was able to take some more photos. And if it hadn't been so hot, I probably would have stayed. But on my way out, I saw Lizzie, and Laura will attest that there we did not have any council members there. I don't know what was going on with that. If we had known that Buttigieg was going to speak, I think maybe because the board members, neighborhood council board members were invited to attend. I think more of us would have shown up. But that's kind of, I mean, I was initially there because Metro was going to be there, and I was going to, you know, I'm still fighting for those damn trees. So I was going to take the opportunity to talk to Metro in a nice way, because I'm not a radical person like that in this situation. But that may have been an opportunity if we have been able to shake some hands and say, hey, you know, I don't know if you've heard about the situation with these airplanes, but that's something that's really important to us. You know, I don't know.
Maybe, or, you know, it's not going to be him opening the letter and reading it. It'll be his deputies or his staff. He probably has a staff of 1 million. So I think if someone wants to take that up, we can't take an action for UNNC. We have to agendize it. But I think it's a good idea. So I think
Well, actually, so Dunn says we're not supposed to weigh in on matters that are not City of LA. But this is a matter that's City of LA, because City of LA is engaged in a lawsuit. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
So, yeah, so our FAA liaison and alternate could bring a proposed letter, I think, forward to the board. And I also think that, also think I'm going to need to not stay on this meeting much longer, but I think we could. I mean, if a letter was drafted from the liaison.
So I'd like someone from this, we need someone to champion it, and we need to either I can ask that liaison. Jeff Camp also goes.
Mhm.
Kurt is the other one. Who's there today. So I would say do we want to decide an approach now about I'm not clear about what we want to accomplish.
I think
whether it's
if
from
they,
UNNC and
I think
You know if there's any upcoming hearing on this? Is there any upcoming action?
we do we're being on the LAWA board, the members.
No, I'm at legal action. Is there anything coming up where we could submit something at a hearing or something like that?
Nothing specific. The lawsuit's ongoing. It'll probably take forever. And we are in FAA board members where they're making decisions.
well, John, here's the question I have. At this meeting, and there was a presentation of a proposal. Is that right? That's what I'm sort of hearing. And the FAA said no, 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 and no.
The proposal was submitted, I think, probably 6 or 9 or 10 months ago or 12 months ago.
Oh,
And they just came, then the word came down today, and that's why there was an eruption bang you're saying. So we've been waiting.
well, I think a letter that says this happened, we're dismayed. You know, we UNNC have a seat on that board.
Yep.
I mean, on LAWA board, or whatever it is. It's not really a board, roundtable.
It's roundtable.
So I don't see why, but it's just the question is who's the letter addressed to? Our roundtable seat holder and alternate can ask the board to send a letter, and it would be better if it was drafted. I don't know the role this committee has or should have, but I do know this, we should put it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting before it goes to governing board, so it can have come through a committee.
Yep. Okay, let me put that down. Yeah, I don't want to take any action on it tonight because we have just a few more minutes left and I'm not clear.
And Teresa is up late for where she is.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so I'm putting P&Z for next meeting, which will be, what's the date going to be, Laura?
August 3rd, I think. Wednesday, August 3rd, is that right?
So we have goals and
Finalize our goals.
finalization.
And we don't know if we have any actual cases, but
Yeah.
those.
It's just
yeah.
been a little dry lately, but possible action, RE, LAWA, FAA.
Yeah, well, we should be happy it's dry lately. We can get going on some of our policy stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, if I could just interject. Donna, do we have anything regarding Johnny Pastrami's that we want to bring to get support?
tonight,
or-
we're working with Shaul regarding their loss. I mean, they were cited by the police and shut down their, I guess,
Live music.
live music nights. So they are attempting to negotiate or work with the community to come up. We met with him, three to four of us, to talk about some things that could do to improve their impact on the community, to improve his business, to work on the crossover. I know Laura would love the pedestrian light there at Montclair. And we wanted to support him from our Quality of Life Committee from West Adams. He reached out to ask for help. He's working with the police as well. And that's where we are.
So Donna, do you want to have an agenda item on August 3 to have taken an official action from you and propose an official action from UNNC?
We're going to meet with him one more time, and I don't think we'll have met by then. After that, we maybe at the next meeting for sure.
Do you want to have it as a discussion or just leave it off until mid-August?
Discussion would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see if we met with him, and he has support, he says, from the council district. We all know
Well,
what the situation is
now
over
maybe
there
he does,
with
or
this-
maybe he doesn't.
No,
maybe
he
doesn't.
doesn't. Maybe he does
regarding a
not.
pedestrian light, yeah, who knows?
So
Okay.
Donna
I
and
don't
Teresa,
know.
I would suggest if you could let me know in advance of like July 30th, because I don't want to steal the thunder, and I don't want to get neighborhood fatigue by having this on the agenda and then not having an action. So let me know, because we don't have to hear it until I don't want to steal the thunder. It wouldn't be effective. So I will tentatively, Teresa or Donna, I will contact you right before we're doing the agenda and ask you if you want us to still have it on the
Yeah,
agenda.
Teresa and I will talk about our next time. He wanted 2
Right.
weeks, Teresa, but everybody's got things going, so.
Yeah,
Right.
because I don't want to have everyone show up to this one,
Yeah,
realize nothing's happening, then no one shows up at the real one.
Okay,
Right,
sure.
and I do want to just raise my hand. I think there's a conditional use permit clause. There's a condition I know there's conditions.
Yes, yes.
But there's a
yes.
specific 1 or 2 conditions related to this that might be, I probably have it somewhere.
He wants a
Yeah.
cafe license.
Yeah,
Teresa, I mean,
Yeah, but that's different.
Laura.
What I mean is, we discussed live music at the time of the application. There's a condition in it that they may not be meeting.
well, yes, please send that if you could to email that to us. But we discuss ways he can mitigate the noise. He's gonna turn the speakers, have them face, rearrange the stage and the speakers to face Adams, to lower the speakers so the noise doesn't elevate, to put some baffling and some other
Right.
things.
so
that-
he got good ideas and was very pleased.
Yeah.
But we're gonna meet again in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
But I would like to know what those conditions are, Laura.
Right, and I would like to remember what they were too, so I'll
So,
I mean, but, but I'm pretty sure, I mean, the only question is going to be as to whether or not it's been digitized and online, because at the time we were still all paper-based.
so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to agendize it unless I hear.
no, not yet. We'll let you know.
Thank you. Okay,
The other
great.
thing, you guys, on the 20th of August, we are having Coffee with a Cop in Benny Potter Park. All neighborhoods will be invited. A flyer will be put out. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows about it from 10 to 1. All the slows are supposed to be in the park as well as the captain. And there'll be an opportunity to have coffee, snacks and such. James is planning it with our Quality of Life Committee, James Masonette. And we are wanting everyone to be a part of this and to share it with the community.
What's
That's
the date?
definite. The
What's the date?
20th of August from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Awesome.
at the pavilion in the annex of Benny Potter Park.
Great.
And we will have a flyer.
You will or won't?
We
No,
will.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Okay, any other past cases, Laura, do you have anything? Anyone have anything? Excellent. Well, that's it. 8:54. Aren't we good? Aren't we brilliant? We're never going to live that one down, Laura. I'm sorry to say. I'm So, okay, everybody have a good week.
Pretend I'm British, because it means something different.
Okay, everybody, thanks. And thanks
Okay.
for,
All right, take care, Teresa.
Okay, thank you, Donna.
All right,
Bye.
be careful. Bye-bye.
Laura, so what I'd like to do, Laura, I see the YouTube thing on the top. I know when we end the meeting, our Zoom meeting, that it will automatically end the streaming portion. But can you click that to see if there's a way to stop the stream now?
Yes, it says stop